Losing both parents is hard enough, but now you're the one responsible for settling the family estate or will or trust. It can be overwhelming. And when you add in the complications of sibling tensions and sibling rivalry, in this episode, we're going to talk about some strategies for easing those sibling tensions. We're going to talk about the basics of what to do when you're the successor trustee of your family's trust, the things that you need to do to make that process go a little bit smoother. And then we're going to also talk about 5 things you can do to help make it easier to manage the relationship with your siblings. It's often the hardest part about settling a family trust when you're the one in charge and your siblings are after you. When am I going to get my money? And you're the one that is having to be the gatekeeper of the assets. We're going to put a couple of checklists in the description to help you navigate what can be an overwhelming process. Hopefully, this episode will help make that easier. Hello and welcome. Danette here. Thank you for tuning in to the Ready to Retire podcast. If you're interested in learning about personal finance and strategies to help you retire with confidence, then you're in the right place. Please consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss future episodes. And while you're here, I'm excited to announce that my new book, The Early Start Retirement Plan, is now available on Amazon. It's packed with practical insights to help you craft a fulfilling life starting today. This book is really about life design and creating a life that is fulfilling today and in the future. Let's dive into this episode and see how we can help you manage this difficult situation of settling your parents' estate while dealing with your siblings. First of all, before we get started, my condolences. If you're watching this episode because you are settling your parents' estate and you have lost both parents now, this can be such a terrible and difficult time. And when we add to it the pressures of siblings wanting to know where their money is, when are they going to get paid, and you have probably never done this before, I put this episode together to hopefully share some of the experiences that I've seen happen over the years and to make that process a little bit easier. So my condolences to you and your family for your loss. A few years ago, one of my clients lost both of his parents. And the parents died actually fairly close together, like within a year and a half. And after the dad passed away, one of the brothers of my client started calling and saying, where is my money? Where is the inheritance? It was so early on in the process. The client had not even received the death certificate, which nothing really can be done until you get the death certificate in your hands. I have seen in more cases than I care to remember where siblings go through this process and they're fighting and they end up not speaking to each other. It's terrible. It's terrible to see the families destroyed because somebody took advantage of something. Maybe there was some language in the trust that wasn't written quite right, and it created a loophole, and people take advantage of that. I've seen so many things. It's almost rare that everybody gets along when this happens. Another client of mine was the successor trustee of the trust, so now she's the primary trustee, and she had to settle for people who lived in another country, and they were calling her and badgering her every single 2 or 3 days. And it is a process. It takes a couple of months. So that is one of the things that you have to be aware of, depending on where you are in the process, that this is something that takes a little bit of time. So I made a list of the things to do for settling the estate, and let's go over those now. Okay, so there are a few things that we have to do when it comes time to settling a estate. And this is just a very general overview. One of the first things you want to do is obtain the death certificate. And those get ordered right away at the mortuary usually. And you end up needing anywhere between 3 and 4 certified death certificates, up to as many as 10 or more, depending on how complex the situation is. We typically recommend that you start with at least 5. A lot of times these days, some institutions will take photocopies, but a lot of insurance policies and annuity companies still want to have original documents. Don't worry, if you do need more, it's something that can be ordered if you don't order enough in the beginning. The second thing to do in your list is to locate the estate planning documents. You want to find out if your parents have a will, if they have a trust. Hopefully, if they have a trust, they've shared with you, or you know where to get a copy of it, and you know who their financial advisor is. You want to start by looking for their estate planning documents. If there is no estate planning documents, if there is no will, then your parents died in what is called intestate. And that means you're going to have to go through the court system to administer their estate. And that's a little bit more challenging. Number 3 is open probate if necessary. And probate is for any assets that do not pass by operation of law. So if it's an IRA, there is going to be a beneficiary named on the IRA. If your parents have a living trust and the house is owned in the name of the trust, then that will pass by operation of law. But if your mom and dad had a joint checking account or a single checking account, if it was just one parent, and they didn't put it into the trust, then that account will have to be transferred through probate. So open a probate if there are any assets that have not been placed into something that has a beneficiary. Number 4, notify relevant parties. I have this as number 4 on my list, but maybe this is something you should do a little bit sooner. If you haven't already notified your parents' financial advisor, their accountant, their insurance person, the professionals that your parents were working with, then now is the time to do so. These first 4 things are things that can be done very early. You also want to make sure that you've notified Social Security and any government agencies. If your parents were receiving a pension, you want to make sure you notify all of the relevant parties. Number 5 is secure the estate. You want to make sure that the assets are protected. If your mom or dad was still living in their own home, you want to make sure that you have access to the house, that you're locking the doors. You may consider staying at the house during the process of settling the physical aspects of what your parents own. Number 6 is take inventory of all their assets and liabilities. Go through their email account. A lot of times we are getting all of our statements delivered to us via email or paperless. So make sure you have access to your parents' email account, check their physical mail, and make a list of all of their assets and liabilities. And you will just be checking off each one as you go through the list and keeping track. Number 7 is settle any outstanding debts and taxes. So if your mom or dad hadn't taken their final RMD, make sure that gets done as quickly as possible, and make sure that any taxes are owed get paid as soon as possible. And you'll want to use a CPA in a lot of cases to help you do that. Okay, number 8 is the moment that your siblings have been waiting for. You're going to distribute the estate. So per the terms of the trust or per the terms of the will, you're then going to distribute the remaining assets after the debts and after the taxes have been paid. You're going to distribute the assets in the estate that are left. Number 9, once everything has been distributed, you're then going to close the estate. You're going to close the trust. You're going to close probate, depending on which route you have to go. And you will then keep really good records of everything together, keep it scanned, keep it in a safe place, and make sure all the accounts that are left have been closed. And that will be the closing of the estate. That is a very, very introductory overview of the entire process. And this entire process can take several months to do, especially if you have a family and you are working and life is already really busy. Getting your parents' estate settled is a very time-consuming thing and can take a lot of time. I want you to get help with your financial advisor or your parents' financial advisor. You can use an attorney to help with the legal aspect and a CPA to help with doing the taxes. Don't try to do this by yourself. Get professional help involved, especially if it's complex, especially if you're dealing with siblings. Let's transition now into 5 tips for helping easing those sibling tensions. Let's talk about some of the ways that we can make this process go easier with our brothers and sisters to make sure that at the end of the process, the family isn't torn apart. The very first one, and I think this is probably obvious, is open and transparent communication. Share with your brothers and sisters what it is that you know and what it is that you're doing. Suggest having a family meeting, even a once a week Zoom call, to get everybody together on the same page and say, this is what we're doing next. This is what my goal is to do this week. And you do want to break it down into smaller, bite-sized chunks and make it a collaborative process. It does take time. So having open and regular, transparent communication with everyone involved, I think is really good, especially setting a regular meeting so that you're not getting bombarded by calls at random times, like some of my clients have had happen, where the person is thinking about it. And so like, what are you doing on this? Or what are you doing on that? Having a regularly scheduled communication, I think, is a great tip. Number 2, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is seek professional guidance. I find that having a CPA and an attorney and a financial advisor involved in the process can really help mitigate the problems with the siblings, because you're telling them, I'm waiting on the CPA, I'm waiting on the attorney. And you can put off some of the responsibility of getting things done onto these other people. That makes your life easier. And then your siblings, the other professionals, can act as a little bit of a buffer. Working with a financial advisor, working with a CPA and attorney can help make your life easier, and especially as it relates to dealing with your siblings. Number 3 is understanding the terms of the trust. What is really important is your parents who have made a trust have taken the time to sit down and write out what their wishes are. Maybe they want to give some grandkids a little bit of money, or they have a niece or a friend or someone that they want to benefit. The terms of the trust, if there is one, it really clearly spells out what it was that your parents wanted to achieve. And this is a document that if your siblings are hassling you about, you can point to and say, look, here is the terms of the trust. Here is the section, and this is what I'm going by. I want to honor the wishes of my parents. And that'll help mitigate some of the problems that you could have with siblings by following the terms of the trust. Number 4 is foster a collaborative approach. What I mean by that is for you and your siblings to get together and talk about your intention as often as possible. You want to make sure that your intention is that the family comes first, that your relationship as brothers and sisters is more important than anything else. And by fostering a collaborative approach, by having regular meetings, open and honest communication, we want to make sure that at the end of this, we are all still friends and intact. And if it's terribly difficult and it's terribly contentious, maybe consider looking at a corporate trust, because then you have a disinterested third party to do the administration, and it puts you back on the same side of the table as your siblings. So that could be something to consider. But really set the intention that we want to remain intact as a family and have our relationship possibly be better because we spent time working on this together as a family. And number 5 is set clear boundaries and roles. In the early days when this is first starting to happen, make sure that everybody understands what their role is. If a sibling is really demanding and really wants action, maybe there's things you can assign them to do to help you as you administer the trust. So, for example, as the successor trustee of the trust, you have certain responsibilities, but you can certainly get help from your siblings. Like maybe one of them can stay at the family house to protect the assets like we talked about earlier. Seeing if your siblings can help you do anything. Can they make phone calls for you? Can they look something up for you? So setting boundaries as to when you'll discuss this with them and setting roles and responsibilities of who is in charge of what, it can really help to keep that communication open and really help keep the tensions down. This can really be one of the most difficult times in everyone's life, or it could be something that brings everybody closer together. Unfortunately, over the years, more often than not, I see it destroy families where people are so angry with each other, they never speak to each other again. That's why it was so important for me to write this episode. But I've also seen some really wonderful things happen. I've seen families where they're like, okay, I'll take this because I like to vacation here. And the other one said, I'll take this. They all got about the same amount and everybody just agreed. And the family stayed close and they were in it together. They were close to begin with, but they were really close after. And that's what I want for everyone who's watching this video, is that to go through this process, it's bad enough now that you're doing this because you've lost both of your parents now. Your siblings are your closest people in life. They know what your parents were like. They knew what it was like growing up with them. And you don't want to lose that relationship over this paperwork. If your parents put a trust together, it's because they wanted you to get along. They wanted you to stay together and they didn't want you to fight. Hopefully these tips can help and will make the process smoother. I have a couple of checklists that I'm going to link to in the description below. Feel free to call our office if you're stuck and we can maybe help point you in the right direction. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that I've given you some help and some tips. And I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.